All right, today we're talking with Dr. Wayne Goins, University Distinguished Professor of Music and Director of Jazz Studies at Kansas State University. Wayne is somebody that I've actually known for many, many years, and I'll describe that a little bit more in a second. But first, I want to say that Wayne is not only a tremendous guitar player and teacher, he's also the author of several articles and books on music. Some of the books that he's written are Blues All Day Long, The Jimmy Rogers Story. He wrote, I'm trying to look for the title, is Pat Metheny about Secret Story. He also did the biography of Charlie Christian, Jazz Guitarist King of Swing, which I've heard is pretty much the definitive book biography on Charlie Christian. So
It's
I
the
think
only one ever written in America.
that's incredible. Just wanted to say this is a very special interview for me because I go back with Wayne to when I was just a young dude at a summer camp, a music summer camp. And Wayne was the guitar teacher there who I studied with. And Wayne was just super inspirational to all of us back then and influential on really what I remember is seeing the guitar and being part of music as a super special club to be in. And I really specifically remember having that revelation there at the camp with you, during one of your classes. So first of all, thank you for that. Really happy to talk to you today. And my first question is really about your own inspiration and motivation when you were coming up and getting started playing guitar. And maybe if you can talk about what practicing, if it was actually practicing at that point, looked like for you, or if it was more experimentation and sort of doing things by ear.
Well, for me, guitar was always learning everything by ear because being born and raised in Chicago, on the South Side and actually born on the West Side, and then we moved to the South Side. My father was an incredible blues harmonica player. In fact, he knew Little Walter personally. And so I grew up listening to all of the chess record stuff, which was right there in Chicago, as you know. So I grew up listening to everything that was Muddy Waters, Albert King, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, Jimmy Rogers, of course. Um, all of the classic Chicago blues stuff I grew up with, Junior Wells, all of that.
Okay.
Um, so everything I learned from just listening to my father's playing records, playing 45s and albums every day, basically, and then him playing harmonica, like literally in the living room
Oh,
all the
that's awesome.
time. I grew up listening to everything that was really soulful and blues. And so when my uncle brought over my father got a guitar from my uncle, and he brought it to me as a surprise. It was the first guitar I ever got, and so everything I learned was just from ear. I mean, there was no sheet music, there was no music stand, there was no books. It was all by ear, listening to the records, and me just trying to find on the guitar neck where all that stuff was that I'd been literally listening to from the day I was born. So
Wow.
ear training was like everything to me. And eventually, as I got older, when I got to high school, I started really getting into not just blues, but I started getting into rock and funk and soul and R&B, pop, all of the styles, beyond just the hardcore blues stuff.
Mm.
And oddly enough, even though I'm a university professor, jazz didn't come into my life until I got to college. I
Mm.
wasn't really listening to jazz a whole lot. It started sliding toward jazz in the last couple of years of high school when we started playing like fusion. I started listening to like Return to Forever
Mm.
and things like that, and so it kind of became rock
Mm.
into slightly aiming toward jazz, which was the fusion stuff. You know, um, Started getting into a whole lot of stuff that listening to like Jaco Pastorius,
Okay.
Stanley Clark,
Mm.
Lenny White, all of that kind of
Right.
stuff.
So it was slowly
It's
connecting you
yeah,
to jazz.
yeah. I started connecting the dots, and
Yeah.
so But even then, it was still really just playing by ear and trying to learn what the most sophisticated end of things was, So yeah, but basically, to the long answer to a short question, playing by ear was pretty much how I developed everything. And to this day, that has been the thing that has served me well, above and beyond anything else, is having a really good ear and being able to hear things and figure out what the nature of it is.
So you stress your training, listening, transcribing, learning things from records,
Yep.
from the authentic source. Do you find, since you've taught so many students, though, that different styles of learning are more suitable for different students, or you think that's a good approach for every student? I mean, do some students need a more academic, from the book approach?
Oh yeah, yeah. I do think that as a teacher, your obligation is to have as a diverse approach as you can to try to best fit whatever the student's natural inclinations or tendencies or learning modes are.
Okay.
As a teacher, that's your obligation.
Hmm.
Um, Having said that, my personal opinion about what works best in terms of what it all kind of comes down to, no matter what your learning style is, I really think that transcribing by ear is above and beyond more important and more valuable than anything. I mean, people. I mean, I have a million books, and some people learn by seeing it visually. Some people learn by just hearing it.
Hmm.
Some people learn by imitating it physically, playing it.
Hmm.
There's a lot of different people. Like, you have all these podcasts now that people listen to. There were no podcasts when I was coming up. There was no YouTube. There was no internet. There was no, all of the things that happen now. Like, none of that was that. So basically, learning by ear was pretty much what it was,
Hmm.
and even though we have all these technical advancements, I still, maybe it's just my personal bias, which it could be,
Hmm.
but I still think that the best way to learn is by learning, transcribing it by ear. And of course, all these other things that we have available to us, all the books and YouTube videos and all that, those are very great. Those are very effective aids.
Hmm.
But I think when it all comes down to it, learning transcribing by ear is still the most prominent and most effective way to get it. Although I have to make accommodations for students who sometimes a method book is, the way to get it. I think method books are great for learning how to read and that kind of thing. Um, but in the end, you got to pick up your guitar and just go play.
Hmm.
And a lot of the styles, um, back in my day, you had the opportunity to learn directly from some of the people who were really prominent players who would take the time and energy and spend time with you and actually show you. That doesn't seem to be happening as much anymore, because the music industry has changed. Where at
Hmm.
some point you'd be able to go up to some of the famous people and go up and kind of talk to them and maybe even get a lesson here or there.
Hmm.
The music industry has changed so much that most people learn almost through videos more than actually going to a concert, hanging out, waiting for them to get an autograph, and then maybe saying, "Go, can you show me this or that?"
Right.
You know, that I don't think it happens that way that much anymore. But that was the way I kind of came up. I mean, I had these sort of these sort of mile markers that I would meet, and people would actually have a direct impact on me from the time locally and then, nationally and then even internationally. At some point, you have these major influences that are actual people that would spend time with you and help guide you along the way, and kind of you looked up to them, you wanted to be them,
Hmm.
you know, kind of thing. And so,
Right.
and I would say Pat Metheny was one of those people. Russell
Really.
Malone was one of those people.
Hmm.
Henry Johnson, who is a great guitar player, was a personal
Hmm.
friend of mine, is currently one of those people.
Hmm.
There's been certain major people in my life that came along. My first guitar teacher in college um, was Milton Jackson at the University of Arkansas in Pine Bluff. It was one of those people.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so when you would learn things, for example, from a record, would you then go and proactively try to maybe take a lick or something and weave it into your next jam session? Do you have a process for sort of incorporating things that you would pull from records, or was it just more like, jam with the record, learn the parts, and sort of absorb it?
Yeah, it always started with, well, it's really kind of like three phases because I remember transcribing things by ear before I ever even had a guitar. I mean, I have like what I describe as a phonographic memory.
Hmm.
You know, I can hear things and it's I can just think of it and it's like putting on a record right in my brain. It's like I can hear it just like
Wow.
it. Oh yeah, I still have that.
You have like an inbuilt tape recorder in your.
I absolutely do. And
That's
as a
wild.
result, I learned solos note for note. I learned lyrics note for note, not just guitar, but anything I heard,
Mm.
I can sing you note for note solos on harmonica or guitar, or
Wow.
some trumpet or saxophone.
I'm
I,
envious.
yeah, I've always had
Sounds
that. I can
amazing.
hear things and play, and just before I even had an instrument in my hand, I was singing solos note for note
That's
on just
wild.
about anything I heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got a guitar, I started finding where that stuff was and gotten to the point where I could, play things note for note. I can still play. I mean, for example, I can play you every note on any Jimi Hendrix album note for note.
Wow.
I mean, I just can do that because
Yeah.
I love Jimi Hendrix, and I just found where all of that stuff was. I can do that with a lot of guitar players. I just can play it note for note
Okay.
because, like I said, I kind of have a phonographic memory, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the ways that I teach my students because I know how effective it is and how much it can actually move the needle for you personally, not only just for you to incorporate that style into your own playing that is gradually developing. That's one way that you can find yourself.
Are you?
I think about Miles Davis, who actually said something one time. It's one of the most powerful phrases I've ever heard. He said, "It takes a long time to sound like yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what he meant by that because it means you got to copy all of the people that you love. The passion is what's going to get you through because you stick with it and you just cling on to those people that you fall in love with,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's Pat Metheny or George Benson or Jimi Hendrix or Bob Marley or whoever. You study that and you absorb it and then you digest it and then you imitate it to the extent that you can. But through all of those imitations, you're walking in somebody else's shoes, but that's the only way to find out what shoe fits your feet best.
So, in talking about this more ear based approach versus the more academic approach, is there sort of a balance that needs to be found, in your opinion? I'm just thinking about Jimi Hendrix, for example. I don't know for sure, but from what I've heard, Hendrix wasn't really a formal practicer. He was more about just playing and jamming and things like that. I could be wrong. But what I'm wondering is somebody like Hendrix, if he did get too much of an academic routine or approach, do you think that would have ruined his musical outcome, the unique personality that he was?
Well, I'm not sure that it would have ruined him
Mm-hmm.
because I think people like Hendrix or Miles Davis or Coltrane or Pat Metheny or I think people are just they're gonna eventually just do what they do. Charlie Christian, he's
Mm-hmm.
gonna be what he it's like it's just in them. They're on a path that I don't think anything could shake what they eventually became.
Okay.
And I think innately they knew what they needed to do to get where they were going. It's like this burning desire that they have that's unquenchable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I also think that they're a product of their environment, which is like, for example, Charlie Christian. I think he came up very much the same way I did, which is there wasn't a lot of formal training around, but Charlie Christian was listening to the radio and getting everything he could literally just through by ear. And him being born and raised in Oklahoma City, or being, well, actually, he was born in Texas, technically speaking, but living in Oklahoma City and growing up as a musician and coming up through that way, Charlie Christian was listening to big band music and like basically a blend of like country music and blues. That whole southwestern kind of movement. Um, and he was listening to big band music, and he actually that's why he wound up being in the Benny Goodman group because he wanted to be with Duke Ellington. Most people don't know that, but he wanted to be in Duke Ellington's band.
Mm.
But that didn't happen. Uh, because Duke had a Count Basie. He wanted to be in Count Basie's band. First, he wanted to be in Duke's band. Then he wanted to be in Count Basie's band. Neither one of those things happened, and so he wound up getting with Benny Goodman because John Hammond kind of discovered him
Mm.
through Mary Lou Williams, who was on tour. She came through Oklahoma City, and she went back to New York and said, "John, you got to hear this guy."
Mm.
And so the rest is history.
Yeah.
But it was all through ear. He wasn't reading music. It's amazing how similar Charlie Christian and Jimi Hendrix are.
Okay.
They neither one of them had this sort of quote unquote formal training,
Hmm.
but they learned they learned what they learned by just copying everything they heard and just trying to emulate. The amount of blues that's in Jimi Hendrix's music is phenomenal. But I mean I completely get that because you're just trying to replicate what you hear. And the same thing you could say about that with Charlie Christian and him trying to learn how to play like jazz and the kind of jump blues that was happening on Second Street in Oklahoma City. He was just trying to get that big band feel and learning how to swing and just using his ear to replicate basically saxophones.
Right. And how would he have grabbed these pieces of vocabulary licks? Was he going, on his record player and just keep looping it over and over, or
Actually, I think
radio?
his was more radio, and then eventually live performances when people would come through town.
Hmm.
They'd have these battle of the bands that would come through town, and he would kind of go and kind of see those kinds of things, and then he got good enough to kind of be in groups. Like he ran into Les Paul at Kane's Ballroom, basically right outside of Oklahoma City, and um, he was trying to be on the scene with that. And when people come through town, anybody that was playing jazz, he would go see them and try to sit in and that kind of thing. It was all just trying to learn, not just from the records, but because you got to remember, he grew up kind of poor, kind of like I did, where you didn't have a whole lot of money to buy records and that kind of thing. So in his day, in the late 30s, early 40s, um, and basically even in the late 20s, it was radio. It was radio,
So you
mainly
really
radio.
had to have a fast ear to be able to. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
because it was it was gone, in a second.
yeah.
Mm.
I actually used to train my ear by playing. I would get next to we had a floor model stereo, and I would turn on the radio and sit next to it. And just my challenge was to figure out what the song was and what was happening before the song ended. And I used to just do
Wow.
that for hours and hours. And the thing that's great is that you don't know what's coming up next. You don't know what the song
Mm.
is. So when the song would come up, I just go, okay, what key is it? I just try to figure out what key it was, figure out what the chord progression was, figure out what the melody was, and you're just trying to
Right.
copy all of that. It's like this hardcore ear training boot camp that you're putting yourself through all day, every day.
This is
You'd be
yeah.
amazed at what that does for your ear.
Yeah, this is great. I love this. This is a great practice tip, I think, because you're kind of putting yourself in the hot seat to be able to figure out this tune before it ends. And
Exactly.
it's fun
And
too,
you
right?
and you're doing it in a safe environment, which is your own home. You're not
Hmm.
embarrassing yourself to anybody. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to discover and be successful and all of that all at the same time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Since we're on the subject of Charlie Christian, I want to read a question. We have some viewer submitted questions. So, just for anybody that's watching this for future interviews I do, please leave me any comments with questions you have about practicing. But right now, we got a question from my buddy Russell Mofsky from South Florida. Great guitar player down there. And he asked what historical evidence exists that points to how Charlie Christian developed his personal style?
Well, I would say that uh, he actually, I think if you had to pinpoint one particular thing about Charlie Christian in terms of how his style evolved, there were a lot of saxophone players because of big band. There's saxophone players were very, very popular. Um, and I think if there was any instrument that influenced Charlie Christian more than anything, it was probably a saxophone. Because as you know, all the big band, the big bands, there was maybe one guitar player if they had a guitar player. But there's five saxophones, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so different people, whether it's Lester Young or whoever, those popular saxophones would get up and take these hot solos, and those were one of the main instruments in a big band. Also, the tone and range of a tenor saxophone, which I think was the main influence on Charlie Christian, probably had a lot to do with his style of playing. The other thing is, I would say, and most people might not know this either, but Charlie Christian uh, was not a quote unquote trained player, but he was very trained in terms of him executing the kind of lines, the bebop lines, but basically it's bebop before bebop was even invented. It's basically swing, this classic swing sound.
Yeah.
Charlie Christian was a three-fingered guitar player. He didn't play with four fingers. He didn't use his fourth finger hardly at all. And if you look at some of if you transcribe some of the solos, you can kind of see the history of a lot of early black guitar players in particular that were three-finger technique. Even George Benson had like a three-finger technique. Wes Montgomery used a lot of
What's
three-finger technique.
what's the benefit of that?
Well, there are some advantages. For example, when you get up past about the 10th fret, things get a little cramped up there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you
Smaller,
think about it.
yeah, smaller distance
Yeah,
between frets.
yeah, yeah. And so that's one of the things that it's kind of like the fourth finger, just maybe it's just in the way. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing about the fourth finger is it's shorter and it's weaker. It's not as strong
Mm-hmm.
as the other three fingers for obvious reasons. And
Yeah,
so it's kind of like the little pinky toe. It's kind of like it's there, but it ain't
it's
really doing
just
much for
yeah,
you,
just
you know?
discard it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So a three-finger technique is one that, and also I'll also say because there's a lot of blues, like I said, and Jimi Hendrix is playing, Charlie Christian's playing. Jimi Hendrix was a total three-finger player. But the
Okay.
exception was, and this might surprise some people, he did use a fourth finger, but it wasn't the pinky, it was the thumb.
Mm.
He played chords where he used his thumb almost as a capo.
Yeah.
And so he play a lot of chords. Like if you ever watch how he plays like a Rolling Stone, when
Mm.
he plays it on the Monterey Pop Festival,
Mm.
that 1967 concert that basically introduced him to America, so to speak. He's capable in so many of his chords, and the F and then the G chord.
Mm.
Um, Actually, all of those major chords he's playing, he's capable with the thumb, and he's
Yeah.
playing three-note chords above it.
Right.
And all of his lead solos, all three fingers, never four. He never uses fourth finger to play solos.
Wow.
And so as a result, I'm a huge Hendrix fan.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up listening to him. The very first album I ever bought was a Jimi Hendrix album.
Oh, yeah.
Is Hendrix in the West. I saw that album in a Woolworth store, and I bought it for like $1.99.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know who Hendrix was. He just looked so fucking cool.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know who that is, but he looks like he really knows what he's doing.
Totally.
I bought that album and it changed my life. And again,
Yeah.
that's one of those albums I can play note for note still just by even thinking about it. I can play those solos note for note.
Mm-hmm.
All of the Hendrix stuff I can play note for note. I just love it.
Is there anything else that you do, when you're out of the practice room or away from your guitar that influence your playing? I mean, I know for me, sometimes if I'm in the process of learning a tune, when I step away from the guitar, I can be sort of reviewing it in my head or maybe like transposing it, mentally, or anything else that you do that you really feel contributes to the development of your playing, whether it's mental
You
or
know what?
physical.
You know what I used to do, and this is I don't know if anybody else did this or does this, but from the time I first started playing, when I was at home, I'd put on an album and I would literally sort of do a mental projection as if I was in the band.
Mm.
And I would just almost imagine me being in that group and
Hmm.
playing along with the record or playing along with. I would just imagine me being in the band as if I actually were recording with them.
Hmm.
I always did that. I still kind of do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's like a mental projection.
Hmm.
Uh, you just it's like time travel or whatever, space travel or whatever you want to call it. That I projected myself into anything that I heard, and it that was my way of sort of aspiring to, it's kind of like act as if kind of thing.
Right. You're giving yourself a future vision of how you want to be, what you
Yes,
aspire to be, and then maybe that like inspires you to actually move, in real life in
yeah,
that direction.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
That's
So that
smart.
when
Yeah.
you actually do, um, it's funny because when you actually do meet some of your heroes or you get a chance to play with some of your heroes, the leap is not as big or scary because in your mind you always thought you were going to be
Hmm.
there. You
Yeah.
always imagined yourself being there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
You
really
say,
cool
yeah,
thing.
I performed with you many times in my mind, you could
Exactly,
tell
exactly,
somebody.
exactly. That's one of the things I always did. Another thing I always did, and I still do, and I teach this to a lot of my students, not just guitar students, but all my students in improv and theory class. I try to tell them that any melody you hear, apply numbers to it. That way, when you transpose, it's no big deal.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
I mean, you can take any melody, and if you
Hmm.
apply like a major scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or even a mode, you can kind of figure out what notes are if you apply it to whatever your particular instrument is. Guitar, in this case, you're talking about fingerings. If you apply that approach, you can almost see yourself playing the music at the point where you hear it.
Okay.
And once you do that, then the key that it's in almost doesn't matter because you've applied fingering to a note pattern.
Awesome. I want to make sure that I ask this other viewer submitted question. This
Okay.
is a viewer, Phil Cole, 7090. He says, regarding your practice routine, if you have 4 hours a day, I'd like to ask if it's better to tackle 2 or 3 topics intensively or to do more things for longer periods. In short, what parameters should you set yourself? How many things, how much time each day, and for how long?
You know what? My answer with this would be the situation is fluid.
Mm,
I wouldn't, I don't think it's the best way to lock yourself into any one particular routine unless you are such a creature of habit that you are less um, productive if you don't lock yourself in. Some people are like that. It's almost
mm-hmm.
uh, like an OCD kind of thing.
You need
Some
parameters.
some people need that rigidness. But
Mm,
to me, life works better when you are able to adapt to situations on the fly.
mm,
So, because that's kind of what real life is. We don't know what we're going to be doing when we wake up in the morning. We know what we think we want to be doing or what we would
mm,
hope to do. But life is about being flexible and being adaptable to whatever happens because we don't have control over everything that happens every day.
mm-hmm.
Because we don't live in a vacuum
Yeah.
unless we choose to put ourselves in a vacuum. If that's how what works best for you, that's fine. But I don't. But that's not what happens to most people on most days, right?
Right.
Um,
So that's
a simple phone call could interrupt your day, right?
right.
Yeah. So anything could happen. So my point is this: when you wake up in the morning, if you are motivated to just play guitar, period, I trust my instincts to guide me and tell me what I need to be doing or not doing. Learning how to listen to your own inner voice, that is honestly the most valuable thing I could tell anybody having to do with anything that we've been talking about.
Mm,
Learn to be still and be quiet and listen to the inner voice that's in you. It will tell you exactly what you need to know about everything you think you want to be doing.
wow. So And but I imagine that that takes a certain amount of self confidence to be able to trust yourself.
Well, you know what? It takes a amount of self confidence, but you know what it really does take more than anything? It takes you shutting out other voices telling you what is and isn't.
Mm-hmm.
When you can shut those voices out, your voice will become louder, and it's on the inside. It's this is getting into sort of metaphysical kind of stuff, but
That's
this
cool.
is really what I have experienced,
Mm-hmm.
where my inner voice will tell me what I need to work on or what I need to not work on for however long, or whether it's one thing that day, and then maybe the next day it might be six things. One day it might be 2 hours, the next day it might be 4 hours, the next day it might be 30 minutes. It's you just have to life is fluid and you have to just kind of go with the flow of your own natural rhythms, which is that inner voice telling you this is what you need to do. I think if you lock yourself into a more of a rigid routine, that I would dare say is probably more unnatural than the natural flow of the rhythm of life, so to speak.
So, Wayne, tell me about the role of self assessment in practicing. Do you actively or routinely record yourself?
You know, self-assessment is an interesting thing. Um, it's good to have self-assessment, but sometimes it's hard to have self-assessment because it's like you trying to assess yourself and like you're
Mm-hmm.
too close to it.
Yeah,
You know what I
sure.
mean?
So, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so it's kind of a double-edged sword. What I try to do, honestly, because I was telling you I have this whole thing with this phonographic memory.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of can remember what I'm playing while I'm playing it. I'm kind of having an outer body experience while I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I try to do is teach myself how to be sort of in the moment, and that becomes my measuring stick of how present can I be while I'm playing uh, music in real time, if that makes sense. It's kind of a double-edged sword because while you're working on things, you're practicing things, it's really sort of, it's still, at best, it's an isolated incident.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really like playing, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so in that sense, I guess I'm going to tie the answer to the question to playing in real time with real people is about it's the best thing in the world that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
So all my energy, my main energy, more than practicing, is trying to be in situations where I'm actually doing it. And
Right.
I know that's hard. That can be hard for people who are in a situation where they're not around a lot of real players or a gig situation, or whatever. I mean, having regular gigs, like a regular, is getting fewer and far between. I mean, these days it's getting harder to have that. I'm lucky in that fact that I actually do have a regular gig. I got a Sunday brunch kind of thing, which is really good. You'd be amazed at how much a regular will do for your playing.
Mm.
That's the ideal situation, which is why I try to have, I always have one or two students who I almost insist on them coming and playing with me because that's the greatest teacher of all, real playing,
Yeah.
real music, real time with real people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's 10 times better than any practicing you can do. And so I guess comparatively speaking, I guess I don't spend so much time sort of practicing. I mean, of course, you have to, once you get to the point where you literally know how to do the thing that you've been working on, I mean, you have to practice to get to the point where you can play scales, chords, tunes, all of that kind of thing. My practicing really is more like playing and just learning how to be more in the moment and playing at the highest level I can. I don't even know if I would call that practice. I guess you could call it practice. Um, but my practicing is really more like learning how to be better at playing tunes out and from memory, of course, and just sort of learning how to get in the zone within seconds, instead of having to kind of work up to getting in the zone. It's really about me trying to capture the zone faster than anything else. And you, in order to do that, you actually have to sort of have that be a goal that you want to work toward. But I remember learning that that's the thing to do. And actually, let me just add one thing. I remember when I first kind of discovered that that was a goal worth aiming at. People might be surprised to hear that it was Bill Evans, the piano player,
Mm.
that made me really want to figure out how do you get to that level where, I mean, Bill Evans is just it's I think more than any other piano player in the world, to me, Bill Evans is just this. I wanted to be like that. I mean, it
I
might
hear
surprise a lot of
you.
guitar players out there, but Bill Evans, man, when I figured out just
Mm.
how good he was, I
Mm.
studied Bill Evans' music for like I think I spent like an entire like year and a half just listening to nothing but Bill Evans music. All of his
Wow.
albums, I got like all of his albums, and I started memorizing his solos and just the
What's
level
your
that he.
favorite Bill
Oh,
Evans
good
album or
lord!
solo?
Well, like I think I mean I got hooked on like the first four Riverside albums of his, and I just couldn't get past those for a long time.
Mm.
There's so much there. It's
Mm.
unbelievable. Like all those the first four Riverside albums are just scary. And it's just it's frightening how good that stuff is, and like listening to like the way he worked with Scott LaFaro.
Hmm. I
Oh
love
my
that.
God,
Yeah,
just
I love that
unbelievable.
stuff.
And the thing I surprised myself because it's not even a guitar player in that band,
Mm.
but
Right.
Bill Evans, the fluidity and just the ideas and how he just flowed. It's something to aspire to. It really is. And a lot of guitar players might not think about that. They might think about other guitar players,
He's
but Lord
he's
have
he's
mercy.
really an immaculate player. You
Oh,
know,
oh my
everything
God.
sounds composed and just. But see,
Yeah,
but I'm curious. Like, do you know anything about the way he practiced? Because I don't really, but I would sort of assume that he maybe had more of an academic approach.
he did. He very much had an academic approach, and it was actually quite classical in nature.
Hmm.
But that was the thing. Like he broke through that wall and used all of the physical, the technical prowess that he had,
Yeah.
and it got to the point where his playing was so circular is the only word I can think about it because it's like he could go in any direction at any speed at any level
Mm.
all at once, and it was kind of like the same thing that you it was like what Miles Davis eventually got to when he had all of his classic, groups, man. Like when you see Miles playing or you listen to the way he interacted with Wayne Shorter and Tony and Ron and Herbie, that's the kind of effect you hear that and it's like they're all just floating and they're
Hmm.
all listening to each other just like the Bill Evans trios. It sounds so effortless. It's like if I if going back to the practicing thing, that's kind of how I practice. I practice by listening and trying to learn how to tap into that mentality, which is really more like a spirituality.
Hmm.
In other words, it transcends the instrument itself. Like when I'm doing my best guitar playing, I'm not. It's like I'm not even playing a guitar.
Mm.
I had conversations with like Pat Metheny is. I talked
Yeah.
about that with him a lot.
I was
Like
just, it's funny. I was just going to say what you're saying reminds me a lot of the kind of things that Pat, the way he
yeah,
thinks, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's above and beyond the instrument itself. That's
Mm.
where the ideal level is. And so when I practice, if we're talking about practice, I
Mm.
sound like Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice. That's to me the ultimate thing to aspire to is to play above and beyond the instrument that you play.
Yeah, see, you're really inspiring me right now, and it's true. I mean, I love a lot of what you're saying. Is you're taking like it's very much like a mindfulness approach, like being in the moment, responding and being able to catch and just that sense of deep listening when you're actually playing with people.
I mean, when you think about it, we're talking about something that is above styles, whether it's jazz or blues or funk or rock or whatever. You're talking about something that's above and beyond fingering or even scales or chords. I mean, it's above all of that, where all of those things are kind of, they're all, it's all of that and more.
Yeah.
But it's none of those things individually, it's all of them collectively, which is greater than the sum of its parts.
Do you do anything to help develop and strengthen your sense of focus and mindfulness? Are there any, could be going for a walk or meditating or anything like that help you in the musical setting to achieve that strong sense of focus?
Well, it's like I mean, it's sort of the same, almost the same answer applies. Where when you're mentally sort of doing this astral projection, so to speak, and when you're listening to music, I
Mm-hmm.
guess the answer to that is just listening, listening, listening. Listening is pretty much, if there was one thing I would say about connected to the playing, there's no great playing without great listening.
Right. Yeah.
The listening has to be more and above and beyond everything before you even get to the playing. It's the listening, it's the input that leads to a greater output. And so listening to everything you can, and this is again above and beyond anything that's a stylistic thing. I can listen to country music and get completely juiced. I can listen to rock music and get completely juiced. I can listen to any style and be like, that swings. I mean, swing is not just a jazz. I mean, anything that is really, really excellent can swing. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
always listening for that swing element in everything I hear. And you can find it everywhere. It's
Wow.
everywhere.
Mm.
Food swings,
Really?
clothes swing,
Okay.
you know,
All right. I hear you. I
cars,
hear you.
cars swing. Swing is everywhere.
Yeah.
And I live to find that. And it affects everything you play.
I'm curious with a lot of the students that you've taught. Are there certain commonalities that you've seen in students that really, really progress at a rapid pace and those that don't make much progress?
I think um, the way I measure any student I've had, the way I measure their progress is whether they come right back with whatever the assignment I give them and they have it and they say, "What else you got?"
Mm-hmm.
That's how I measure progress. And you know, I'm sure you've experienced this too. Like the older you get, the more you teach, and the more you try to pass along what you know to the next person, whoever that is. Uh, the older you get, the less time you feel like you want to waste. You don't,
Mm-hmm.
teaching is this transfer of knowledge, and you don't want to feel like what you've accumulated over the years are going to waste to whoever is sitting in front of you saying they want what you have.
Mm-hmm.
So my idea of teaching or effective teaching is when the student that I'm teaching takes what you give them and comes back and say, "I got it. Here it is," and they show you and they say, "Okay, I'm ready for the next one." Anything less than that, like if it takes them too long or they say, "Oh, I don't have it this week," a lot of times in academia, if you're teaching at a university, the students kind of think, well, it's just I've paid for the class. It's my right to come in every week and just kind of, but
Yeah.
that stuff doesn't matter to me. If somebody doesn't have what we've been working on as a team, if they don't have it, I won't teach them anything else. I say, come back when you got it.
Really? Okay.
And sometimes they don't come back, and I'm cool
Mm.
with that.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you about sort of the teacher's role in being a motivator. Like when you do have those students that seem to maybe just be a little bit lazy or they don't have the drive of other students.
Motivation has to come from within. I can't
Mm,
I can't give it to them.
mm,
If they are motivated by what I am and what I do and what I stand for,
mm,
that's fine. But it's still coming from them.
yeah.
I'm just doing what I do, and I've done what I've done, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. That's in me.
Hmm.
If they're motivated, they can use me as motivation. They can use records as motivation. They can use being in a band as motivation. Motivation is wherever you can find it. But if they're coming to me for help or advice or guidance or progression, I'm here for it. But they got to be here for it too. So I'm not going to care about their progress more than they will.
Hmm.
That I won't do.
Right.
So to the extent that they are motivated to do whatever it is I'm prescribing, it's just like a doctor. You write a prescription, you give it to them, And if they come in for another checkup and you find out that they continue to eat hot dogs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner instead of eating some vegetables that you asked them for, you're like,
Yeah.
you ain't doing what I told you to do, so I can't help you.
Right. Come back next time when you're
Exactly.
ready.
Yeah.
Where does the idea of talent fit into all this in terms of students that you had? Do you find that sometimes students who feel that they're talented, people tell them that they're talented, can at the same time be a little bit lazy with following through? Can that be a negative for people to tell you that you're talented?
It can be. It's not necessarily so, but it can be. I mean, the thing I always think about in terms of talent is talent without hard work is wasted.
Mm,
So I have students who are not nearly as quote unquote talented as the next person,
mm,
but their work ethic is off the charts. And
mm.
eventually that person is going to pass somebody who's naturally talented.
Yeah,
And I've seen that. I've seen that many times.
yeah,
Sometimes having a gift or naturally talented is maybe the worst thing that can happen to a person
mm,
because they know that they have this natural thing and then they just kind of rest on their laurels. They
yeah,
don't really make nearly as much progress as somebody who is hungry because they know they have to work hard and they've accepted that. And so they work hard and they grow and they pass the person who is by from standing still, maybe they're here, but this person's got a work ethic, and next thing you know, they're here, and that person maybe only made that much progress.
yeah. What do you think about that idea, specifically in terms of somebody wanting to develop their feel or their groove? Like, have you found that there are certain people that no matter how hard they work at it, they just don't innately have the ability to have it like a super amazing feel, you know?
Yeah, no, I actually have seen that. I've
Mm,
seen it. I've had students who had that. I've played with, you know, band members.
mm,
I'm playing with a couple now that might not be swinging, you know. And that's a hard one because really there's not a whole lot you can do about that other than to just hope that they find a way to get better at increasing their swing ability, so to speak.
mm.
There's not a whole lot you can do about that. I mean, the one thing I won't do is tell them to play with a metronome
Okay. So no
because
metronome.
a metronome is not real.
Hmm.
It's not real. I will say this though: if there are some people who really just can't believe that a metronome won't help them, I would suggest then that they deliberately play on the beat, behind the beat, and in front of the beat if you're going to use a metronome. Deliberately train yourself to be in all three places. Like
Mm.
set it for whatever tempo you want to set it
Okay.
and learn how to be on the beat, deliberately play behind the beat, same tempo, deliberately play in front of the beat and learn what it feels like to be in those three places to the point where you can control it completely
Hmm.
being in any of those places.
Okay. And would you say that that helps in terms of playing with the different drummers you're going to encounter and maybe the way that they play the ride cymbal?
It's not just drums, it's the whole band.
Mm,
Because when you talk about the concept of groove,
mm,
this is really what we're talking about. Groove is not something that is static, perfectly static, like what a metronome is. That's not a band. If they played metronomically, doesn't swing.
mm,
It doesn't swing. It's robotic, literally robotic.
mm,
Swing is this thing that breathes. It's like a pulse. It's like a
mm,
wave that it pulses in and out.
mm.
It's like a heartbeat, a heart rhythm. Your heart doesn't beat exactly metronomically. Your heart doesn't do that.
Wait,
Your heart changes
mine
based on.
does. No,
I
I'm
know
just.
your heart doesn't. It pulses according to the way you breathe.
Mm,
A really good band that's swinging, they're breathing,
mm,
and it has a and it's
true.
that pulse that you feel. That's when a band is swinging. And I'm not just talking jazz. This is not a genre specific thing. This is any music, reggae, folk, rock, country, punk, pop, whatever.
Mm,
Bands that swing, and you can hear it. When you hear a song that you fall in love with, it ain't just the song.
mm,
It's the pulse of the song.
Hmm.
The song can be crap, but if the band is swinging, you're gonna feel that. You're gonna feel that, which
Hmm.
means that the song is not totally crap. Because even if you don't agree with the lyrics or the chord progression or even the melody or the words, if that band is swinging, it's gonna pull you in.
I don't know if this will be a question, but this is just a little anecdote I wanted to tell you that
Okay.
a memory that I had from
Okay.
back in the day at the music camp,
Yeah.
which was that I came in for a lesson with you, and I remember specifically asking you, "How do you get a jazz sound?" I had that question because honestly, at that time, I had no concept. I was just starting and getting into classic rock and things. I had really no idea about anything of jazz, the vocabulary, the language, or anything like that. But I remember that you played in some of the recitals with the faculty and stuff, and you were doing some jazz stuff. What I heard was like a jazz sound, and well, I remember you said that you had the exact same question as I did when you were young. And one of the things that you told me, which I think was more of an articulation thing, was to kind of rake the strings. So I think probably for the next 5 years, I was like raking everything to get that jazz sound. But like often, one of my questions is for students like if you're coming from just a purely, let's say, a blues background, and now you want to make that bridge into more fuller jazz vocabulary, maybe incorporating some kind of bebop lines and chromaticism and things like that. I remember that it was very much a mystery for me early on. I knew the idea of improvisation, but I didn't really know how to travel the fretboard and how to get there and how to maybe move out of my basic blues scales into. But I would imagine, like based on what we said, that it would be a lot of listening and maybe transcribing from those kind of records.
Yeah, it absolutely is because when you're listening, and we talked about this not too long, a few minutes ago about the input having everything to do with what the output is. When you're listening now, we can talk specifically guitar. I mean, it goes above and beyond that because, like I said, even Charlie Christian was trying to. It's so funny you should mention this thing about how do you get a jazz sound
Mm-hmm.
because Charlie Christian was faced with the same problem. He's trying to figure out how to make his guitar sound like a saxophone
Mm-hmm.
or get those dark tones that the piano players get. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's above and beyond the instrument that you're playing. It's this thing that you're trying to ascribe to, like how to get to that next level, you know. Or even if it was listening to a guitar player and he's trying to figure out how to phrase like him or how to get that tone, it still comes down to listening and trying to emulate the thing that you're trying to get to. So if you want to be a jazz guitarist, you got to listen to the jazz guitars, a lot of them, and
Mm-hmm.
because all of them they're different and they all have something different to say, but they create this sort of composite that. And it's not just one guitar player to listen to. And again, like I said, it's not even just guitar players you want to listen to. You want to listen to almost so the essence of what jazz is, which is above and beyond guitar. Like I said, Bill Evans had a huge influence on me that I was sort of shocked to discover on my own. It's like this isn't a guitar player, but the way he phrases and that tone that he gets in his fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and again, and that's another thing. You hear about piano players talk about the touch. You can put three different players on a piano and it will sound different because they're literally the touch that they have that
Mm-hmm.
they can coax from the piano.
Yeah.
Guitar is kind of the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Guitar is the same way. You have a certain kind of touch that you have, and not just your left hand, but also your right in terms of the picking technique you use. All of these little subtle things lead to what develops in terms of your tone
Mm-hmm.
and your phrasing,
Right.
right? Your articulation. It's the same thing like horn players have when you talk about embouchure on trumpets or saxophones. You know, all of those little things come, but they come as a result. You develop that as a result of listening to these little subtle shadings, and uh, trying your best to copy that. And the more you try, the closer you'll get to it. But none of it happens if you're not listening.
And do you have maybe two or three of your most favorite jazz guitar specific albums to recommend, or that you give to a new student who's really just trying to start improvising?
The incredible Wes Montgomery, that one just blew me away
Mm-hmm.
completely. Uh, I would say the one that also the first great jazz guitar album that just knocked me out was "Breezin" by George Benson.
Mm-hmm.
And then honestly, anything by Charlie Christian because his tone and
Mm-hmm.
his phrasing uh, is just above and beyond like anything. That to me, it's a miracle. It's amazing to hear how he did that with such sort of, you don't want to say limited resources, but they were minimal resources that he maximized. That's the best way to put it.
Once somebody, let's say, starts practicing over a jazz blues, do you have a go-to tune, a next tune for them to start working on in terms of a jazz tune?
Well, it's. I would say I don't know if there's a particular tune in fact, but one of the things I will say is this. I think, and some people really, they don't like, I know some people who I have lots of respect for that don't really care for using real books necessarily. But honestly, I think if you use it the right way, a real book can be very, very, very helpful in terms of advancing your ability to play. And then I say that in the sense that uh, memorizing songs, started using a real book to start with, but then moving off of it as fast as you can and just learning tunes, learning the melody, learning the chord progression, learning how to solo over it after analyzing the changes.
Mm-hmm.
I teach that and preach that all day long to all of my students. Um, and just learning how to play those songs from the inside out. I mean, the change, I mean, and again, a lot of stuff in the real book is not even correct, right? Especially some of
Right.
those Hal Leonard versions, they got wrong melodies, they got wrong chord changes.
Mm.
It's scattered with things that are wrong. But at the same
Yeah.
time, if you can just take what you can out of it and move on and make like get above and beyond it, you can learn how to play those tunes correctly using your ear and going back to the original source of where those songs came from.
Mm-hmm.
That's the homework part. That's the history part. That's the disciplinary part where you got to go above and beyond the thing that you come into. You got to go past that and then go all the way back to the source. Eventually, it always has to go back to the source. Find the original versions of any of these tunes in the real book. The other thing I would say that's worth saying, learn the words, learn the lyrics of these jazz tunes
Mm.
because it'll shape the way you play the melody. It really, really, really will.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
that's
So,
really good. That's a
yeah,
really good
these are
tip.
the kind of homework assignments that I assign to students where I really try to get them to go beyond the surface. If they really, really, really want to get it right, you got to go all the way back to the source. And it's basically teaching them jazz history. Like they might have not come into your lesson with that, but you got to put that on them. You're doing them a disservice if you don't give them that part of it. It's not enough to just learn the basic chords and scales on a real book. You got to learn like what is the real.
Right. It's almost really like two different levels. One is
It
just the
is.
surface level, and you're sort of seeing those real book tunes as just a vehicle for blowing, on verse, actually seeing it as a real, genuine song, that means something.
Exactly.
That's so important. That's such a great tip. But with that being said, I want to thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and I think a really insightful
I,
discussion.
I really
Thank you
enjoyed it,
so
and I
much.
really appreciate you having me here on this program, man. And again, I said it, earlier before we got started, but I want to say it again. I cannot tell you how proud I am of you and what you've done, what you're doing, and I'm just honored to be able to spend some time in your life, all those years ago, because for whatever I taught you, you taught me just as much. Because teachers, if without students, you're just teaching yourself, I guess.
Hmm.
But the best teachers really learn quite a bit from their students. And I remember having you. You were one of my favorite students at the time. And like, those memories that you have, the questions that you asked me or answers that I gave you, and I just
Wow.
remember you being very studious and really, really caring about what you wanted to do and really giving your best and doing all the work and putting in all the work on the scales and chords and all that stuff. And I just remember you going into that studio that we had in lessons in Lennon and McCartney,
Hmm.
yeah, and yeah.
Man, that is so great. Yeah, well, that's really beautiful, and we'll stay in touch, and we'll link up some links to some various things like some of your books and articles and or whatever in the
Absolutely.
comments. And again, for anybody for any future discussions that I'm doing, please drop me any suggestions for practice related questions. All right, thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Greg. This was great, man. I enjoyed doing this.
Me too. All right, ciao.
Bye.